2021 meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Before the tax rate can be set, the Board of Selectmen must hold a public hearing each year to consider the tax rate options available to the town. The hearing is held after the assessors have determined final values and reported this information to the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. The purpose of this hearing is to determine the percentage share of the tax levy that each class of property will pay. The CFO and assessment technician are here tonight to provide data relevant to this process so that we can adopt parameters for the fiscal 2022 tax bills. Having said that, I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
We're going to actually continue the hearing because we have a gentleman, Mr. Dugan, who is joining us today to talk about changing the manager at Chili's. Good evening, Mr. Dugan. Am I saying your name right?
Yes, you are, ma'am.
Great.
Madam Chair, Andrew Upton, counsel for the applicant, is here as well.
Hello, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so would you like to give us an overview of what's happening?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Jimmy, why don't you just let me lead off and then we'll get to your specific qualifications. We are just changing the manager at this Chili's on Hartford Ave. There's no other changes to any aspect of the corporation, the hours, the floor plan, the menu, no change whatsoever, except the company has decided to promote Mr. Dugan. He's very experienced. He's been with Chili's for almost 5 years. He is a veteran of the Army National Guard, and the company is looking forward to having him in charge, and we're glad to answer any questions.
Over to my colleagues. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Dugan?
I don't have any questions.
Already sounded pretty good. Yeah. Good.
Straightforward. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the change of manager for Chili's on Hartford Ave. Second.
First from Dan, second from Don. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thanks to Hillary for all your help in the process.
Sure.
You're welcome to stay on and listen to our discussion about the tax rates if you wish, or you could also bow out.
I might keep that on in the background. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.
Have a great night.
All right. Should I turn it over to you, Mary, to lead the discussion?
Sure.
Okay.
Let me just get set up here. Behind me?
Yeah.
Can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I wait for this night all year long because this is the culmination of all of the work from our assessing office as well as all of our hard work through town meeting. And tonight we are here to have our tax classification hearing. I know that all board members have participated in this process, so we will try to get through the information as swiftly as possible. Just for the public's edification, I did send out this slide deck to the board ahead of time so that they had an opportunity to take a quick peek at it. But what we're here to do tonight is to talk about the tax shift. The town of Bellingham has had a split tax rate for a number of years, dating back to 2003. And what that allows you to do is shift the tax burden from residential taxpayers to commercial, industrial, personal property tax base. And so we're going to talk about how that shift works and the impacts of that shift. Given that we have, let me just take a quick step back. So we have a number of things to go over tonight, and at the end of our discussion, I am going to ask you for our standard 5 votes, and I will need a motion on each of those so that they can be duly recorded and this information can be submitted to the state. in order for us to set our tax rate and issue our Q3 tax bills, which are due to be mailed by January 1st. So let's just jump right into the process. Now that we have finished town meeting, and we cannot hold this tax classification hearing until we have completed town meeting because some of the votes that happen at town meeting affect our budget. And we need to have a final budget before we can actually have our tax classification hearing. So since we've completed town meeting, what I can share with you is that our FY22 overall budget is $78.1 million. That is general fund and enterprise funds, as well as all of the other various articles that we have voted and approved through town meeting for FY22. The portion of the budget that is funded by the tax levy, so 62% of our overall budget is funded by the tax levy. That 62% is what we're here to talk about this evening. And because the town has adopted a split tax rate, and we are recommending that we continue to have a split tax rate, what that does is it allows the town to shift the tax burden. So this chart in the lower lower right-hand corner, if you will, the bottom bar indicates if we had a single tax rate, there was no split, then for the entire tax levy, $33 million would be raised from residential taxpayers and $15 million would be raised from our business base. But by having a tax split or a shift, you can see that the levy changes. I'm showing the current factor, which is 0.89. The impact of a 0.89 shift on this particular levy for FY22 would result in raising $30 million from residential taxpayers and $18.1 million from our commercial, industrial, personal property. So what we're here to do tonight is to decide on that factor and that split. The crux of this conversation is all driven by property values because our budget's now been set through town meeting. So the only other variable that really comes into play is what's happening with our values. So Cheryl Hanley is here this evening and she's going to go over a couple of bullet points to talk about our values, trends that we are seeing in FY22 that affect this classification hearing, and then also a couple of notes about what we expect to have happen for next year, because that should play into your decision this evening, knowing what we expect to have happen next year so that there's no big surprises. So with that being said, Cheryl.
Hello,
Opportunity.
I am Cheryl Hanley. I'm also joined off camera by our Board of Assessors. We have Tara Damiano, who is our chairwoman, Lynn Roy, and Grace Devitt. So I thank them for being here tonight. Talking about our current fiscal year 2022 value trends, the average value of a single family home increased 7.2% in Bellingham from $339,000 to $360,000. Property values across all class codes continue to rise. Bellingham maintains a thriving real estate market with ample arm's length sales, which are used in our statistical analysis. New growth actually exceeded our expectations this year, coming in at over $960,000. Key contributors to this figure include the addition of 37 new homes, work in progress captured on partially completed projects, the new storage facility at 302 Hartford Avenue, the new warehouse at 160 Mechanic Street, the pre-construction site value of the Curtis apartment complex, and over a third of this revenue actually came from personal property. I'd like to note that this substantial personal property growth number should be considered a one-time event. Personal property is largely a self-reporting tax, and some businesses don't necessarily know what equipment should be listed. So Bellingham, we contract with a personal property valuation expert. And this vendor completed a comprehensive review of all of our records and also conducted extensive field review and in physical inspections this year. And this resulted in the discovery of 19 new accounts and also the addition of new equipment on existing accounts. Total new growth in this sector alone was over or just under $350,000. We're going to continue working with this vendor to ensure the accuracy of our data and complete periodic physical inspections so that we can stay on top of new equipment that's being added on our existing accounts or new businesses, et cetera. We're going to make sure we're on top of that.
Cheryl, when you say 19 new accounts, what does that mean actually? 19 people that were under the radar screen or?
Some were new. So for example, the Amazon warehouse is a new account for fiscal 2022, and that was a nice sizable number. Some accounts may have not realized the extent of what needed to be reported, so they may have considered being considered as low value threshold. You may be aware that in order to receive a personal property tax bill, you have to have personal property exceeding $9,500 to receive a tax bill at all. So some kind of went from a low value account to being taxable. So a combination of actual new businesses and fine-tuning the details of existing accounts. And it's no harm, no foul. It's just, it's a tricky tax to understand, and that's why it was so imperative for us to work with this company that it's called RRC. They're very well known in the industry, and they've done an excellent job for us.
Awesome.
So when you say equipment, we're talking about conveyor belts, we're talking about machinery inside these facilities.
Yeah, and
correct?
it also depends on what kind
Vehicles.
of organization
Yep.
it is.
Mhm.
If they're incorporated, this can be taxable. If they're not, if they're a leasing company, they're not taxable. So
Right,
it's a
right.
very complicated tax. So we rely on their expertise to make sure that we're capturing as much as we can, but we're doing it correctly.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So why does personal property not become a recurring item?
It is a recurring item.
In terms of the growth, you mean?
Well, it says recent spike in personal property is a one-time event.
It is an ongoing, I just wouldn't expect a third of our growth number to continue being in the
Still,
sector.
it's still gonna be part of the total.
100%.
If I may jump in on that real quick. The thing about personal property is it's furniture, fixtures, equipment, and machinery. They depreciate
Appreciable.
very quickly.
Yeah.
And so we've added $350,000 of new growth to our tax levy. That will not go away. But as the value of those assets start to depreciate, and they depreciate pretty quickly, that tax levy burden gets shifted to all the remaining taxpayers.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
So as we look ahead to fiscal 2023, we may not see the exact figure that we've been used to seeing in the last several years, but we do have several known projects to look forward to. Candlelight Village has 20 plus homes yet to be completed. Bellingham Shores will have 100 plus new lots in varying stages of completion. Raven Homes are building 4 new lots. We expect phase 1 of the Curtis apartment complex to be complete. We're also hopeful we can capture the remaining 25% of the warehouse at 26 William Way. In addition, the pandemic has sparked a sustained, unprecedented tidal wave of home improvements and backyard projects. Residents are investing in their properties in town. They're adding finished basements, home gyms, home offices, increasing their living spaces. We're tracking permits for additions, large decks, in-ground pools, cabanas, etc. Our online permitting software and our daily collaboration with the inspectional services team will ensure that we accurately capture these improvements. And beyond the growth, I just don't be surprised next year if we're talking about a sizable jump, a significant increase in the property values in fiscal 23.
That's about it. Fantastic. And by that, she means that we are expecting a very significant growth in the average single family home value. So we've already seen that we've gone from 339,000 up to 460. We're expecting next year when we sit down again that we're going to see another big jump in the average single family home value here in the town of Bellingham.
So I sold too early.
Perhaps. Although that bubble's coming down.
Yeah, I
All right. So that's what's happening with our values, and since the values are one of the big variables in this entire equation, it's important to know what's going to happen. If we're going to see a huge drop off in one of our sectors, we need to be prepared to set our factors accordingly. Since we're hearing that we still have continued strong growth across all of our sectors, I'm just going to jump right to my recommendation, and my recommendation is that I'm going to ask you to maintain a factor of 0.89. That being said, all of my charts that I've shared with you, I've highlighted the current factor of 0.89, and if we reaffirm that factor this evening, then these results will be what our tax base can anticipate. So the way the shift works is you go from a uniform or single tax rate all the way down to a shifted tax rate of a 0.85. And so Bellingham has been at 0.89 for a number of years. This particular chart is taking a look at an average single family home, and where their value sits in the data strata is where their impact is going to be. So I've highlighted the FY22 average single family home of $360,328. If we were to affirm a factor of 0.89, the average single family tax bill for FY22 would be just over $5,000, $5,073. That's up from last year's average single family tax bill of $4,884. And so what you'll notice is that there is a significant drop in the tax rate itself. However, the average single family tax bill is in fact increasing. The reason that we have such a significant drop in the tax rate, because right now we're at $14.41 per thousand for a residential rate. This calculation comes out at $14.08 per thousand. It is because the overall values, the values that Cheryl was just talking about, the values have grown so large and at such a higher or faster percentage than our budget that it causes the tax rate to go down. So it's a simple algebraic equation. Your tax levy divided by your total property value across all sectors comes up, calculates your tax rate. So it's budget or levy divided by property values equals tax rate. When that denominator grows at such a higher rate, the tax rate drops.
Yes.
Okay?
Only Mary described that as a simple algebraic.
Well, what's interesting
Remember algebra.
is that you'll have people out there say, well, the tax rate's gone down, why am I paying more?
Yep.
They don't quite get that piece that you just described, and that's going to be a challenge for someone to see the rate going down.
Exactly. You have to remember that when the rate goes down and your value goes up, and we've just heard that across all of our sectors, our values have gone up.
Yep.
That the impact is that the tax bills will continue to grow.
But doing the math, it's a 3.87% increase
On the
on
tax
the
bill,
average
yes,
tax bill.
yes.
So people are going to say in a Prop 2.5 environment, why is it a 3.8? And our answer is
Because our tax, so remember, it's when you talk about Prop 2.5, you cannot apply Prop 2.5 to a single tax bill. Prop 2.5 applies to the entire tax levy. And in addition to Prop 2.5, we also increase our levy by new growth, which was 1.8%. So our levy actually grew over 4% for the overall levy. You have to look at each person's proportionate share of that levy. There are some tax bills that go down and there are others that go up.
but based on the average. it
But
went
based
up
on the
3.8.
average single family home, yep, it's up just over 3%. Okay. So tonight what we're talking about is the shift of our tax levy. Now, if you look at this chart here, the top row would be a single tax rate. So if we had a single tax rate and didn't shift, 69.1% of our tax levy would be paid for by residential taxpayers, and 30% would be paid by the commercial, industrial, personal property. If you drop all the way down to the row that I have highlighted, which is a factor of 0.89, what that does is it shifts the levy to 62.6% being paid by residential taxpayers and 37.3% borne by our business class. So that's the shift that happens. We take the entire levy and move it over. In dollars, it equates to just over $3 million using a factor of 0.89. Okay, so if you look at the lower right-hand corner of this chart, and you do have handouts of this particular chart in case you can't see it, what that will result in is on an average single-family tax bill, an increase of $190 or $16 a month. And that is a 3.9 or 3.8 something increase over the previous year. Okay.
Yes.
So I know we're talking about the residential assessments being up and expected to be up even higher. Where are they with regards to commercial industrial? I know we spoke about it from 2019 industrial, but from commercial industrial from 2021 to 2022 as far as growth and or increased values
Okay.
percent-wise.
Yeah. Flip over to my chart.
Sure, so commercial increased 5% and industrial was up 10.6.
All right. And residential percent? is-
7.2.
Okay, so they're right in line.
Condominiums a little bit more stabilized at 4.4%.
And what are you projecting for next year?
It's hard to say before we do this, the analysis, but just processing the deeds every month, and because what's happening now in calendar year 2021 is going to be the basis for the fiscal 23 values, even outside of growth. And sales are up right now. And I expect a more dramatic increase than we had, we had a very healthy growth at 7.2 in the single family home. And I think it's going to be stronger than that in
So what,
next year.
and on the commercial end?
On
Not
the
as dramatic.
commercial end, we will have,
I would say it's not going to be nearly.
I
as
don't think
dramatic.
it's going to be as dramatic as the residential jump for in 23. That's right.
So when you look at that though, you're probably, if we were to do this a year from now, we might need to move to 0.88 or 0.87 because of that jump, if commercial doesn't keep pace with residential.
If you're going to 0.87, you're shifting more of the burden to the businesses.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah. Yep.
But given, I mean, the whole reason for shifts to begin with was because of the dramatic changes
Yep.
in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yep.
And if we're going in that same trend, unless there's a spike in 24, turn it back.
I think we need to take a look at what's in front of the planning board and see what kinds of additional commercial developments that they're looking at.
Madam Chair. So I was reviewing this before we came in, and what Mr. Conrad said, I was actually thinking of 0.87 or 0.86. I know your recommendation is 0.89, but I was looking at how do we shift some of that burden more toward the commercial. And I don't want to put us in a really bad position, but I look at all the development that's going on in the town. I look at the impact it's had on our roads and everything else. And our residential population is not increasing dramatically. The value is going up, and that's fantastic. Supply and demand, it's simple economics. But when you start looking at what's happening in town with all the increased traffic, et cetera, to me, it's like, I know the factor is going down to 14.8, but why wouldn't we consider thinking about reducing that factor now instead of waiting a year from now to 0.87? We've done the math there. If you thought, I'm sure you've thought of everything, Mary, but I just want to understand why we wouldn't consider going to 0.87 now.
So let me respond to that. I'm going to just jump ahead. All right.
Yep.
So because we're going to talk about these top taxpayers. And so you have this chart in front of you that we've looked at in prior years. So I'm going to get to my recommendation, and I want to raise one point that hasn't really been a factor before, but it's starting to become more significant. And that's my last bullet point down here. The reason I'm recommending to retain the factor of 0.89 is first to maintain some consistency across our tax base. We've had a couple of changes in the last couple of years that have really impacted our residents. Number one, we passed Prop 2.5 override. We've also implemented a stormwater enterprise user charge. And so we've had some changes in our tax levy that have been borne by our taxpayers, residential and commercial alike. The recent spike in personal property is, as we talked about earlier, sort of a one-time event and infusion into our levy that we're not going to see that level recur. But more importantly, we need to keep a close eye on the increasing concentration that's being borne by our top 10 taxpayers. And so I'm going to just quickly jump back to that chart of our top 10 taxpayers. I'm going to highlight for you these percentages right here. And this is a chart that I believe I handed out to you guys.
Very tiny.
It's really
Yes.
hard to read.
Okay.
2 slides on 1 page.
So what happens here is we have about 572 business accounts, commercial, industrial, personal property. And of those business accounts, 10 of them, or 10 real estate and 10 personal property, so 20 accounts, and there could be some overlap there. Those accounts account for 26% of our tax levy. All right, so if we continue, and that's a high percentage. And if we continue to shift burden to the commercial, industrial, personal property class, what we continue to do is we continue to increase the share of the levy that they are paying for. Now, as a residential taxpayer, you think, well, that's great. However, as a town, we need to be cognizant of that fact, because one of the questions that always gets asked by our bond rating agencies every time we go out to borrow or we issue an annual report is, who are your top 10 taxpayers and what is the share of the levy that they pay? If they pay a higher percentage of your levy, you are at a greater risk should anything happen to any one of those businesses. Okay, and so what I'm highlighting for you here is in FY21, those top 10 real estate and top 10 personal property, they comprise 25.75% of our levy. This year, it's increased to 26.10. And if I showed you the prior years, you could see that that trend is continuing. And that concerns me. And it concerns me that we would be at risk if anything happened to any one of those businesses.
Looking at these businesses though, they're not going anywhere. Even if they went out of business, the structure's there.
The structure is there, but there's no guarantee that there might be a replacement tenant. You know, where we also have to look at.
If Amazon exists, sorry to cut you off, if Amazon exists and they're not using the facility, they still pay the value of the facility.
They would more than likely file for an abatement, given that they are not at its highest and best use in operation. And a lot of these businesses, they're taxed using an income approach. And so if they're not occupying those space, and that although that structure may exist, they could have a strong argument for an abatement in their taxes.
So the new property that is right across from PJ's is in that position?
Well, they have a new tenant that we're hoping is occupying. Trimark, that one, is that what you're talking about?
Lincoln
Yeah.
property.
Lincoln property.
Yeah.
160 mechanic.
Yep.
Yep.
And so you,
The other thing that I would say to keep in mind, there's a trade-off when you bring business in. Obviously, there are impacts to the residential community. We continue to be about well over $2,000 below as far as comparable communities in the area. In our area, $2,000 below the average tax bill. And the reason we're able to do that, obviously, is because of the commercial industrial that we have in town. So we are still, the closest to us is in Blackstone, and I think we're still $500 or $600 below Blackstone.
yeah.
Was
So
that a chart you were
so
going to
this
pull up?
is.
We're stealing all of it.
To me, at the end of the day, and that's an important point, Dennis, but at the end of the day, how we compare to other towns is not really relevant. It's what we're providing for services back to our people. And when we, as select board members, and I'll speak for myself, hear residents telling us, why are our roads in bad shape? Why aren't our schools doing better? And we talk about, well, we have a lower tax rate, the whole bit. My point is that are we as a community giving as much back to our residents for that 1402, for that, you know, or the 15, whatever the number is? I think the lower tax rate. So my thinking is, and what we hear them saying is, there's more traffic, there's more this, there's more that, and there's just all of this. So I was just throwing it out there. I wasn't saying I agree with it. I was throwing it out there so the residents could understand why you came up with a 0.89 factor, but more or less, I I look at the shift in, as Cheryl talked about, the increase in property values is going to come up the following year. And as Mr. Connor said, why wouldn't we go to 0.87 then? These large businesses, they're not going anywhere. Dunkin' Donuts isn't going anywhere. Best Buy isn't going anywhere. Amazon's not going anywhere. So I'm just thinking, why wouldn't we put a little bit more burden on them, unless it really messes our bond rating up? But if the risk is that high, if the risk is truly that high, I agree with you. But if the risk is not really that high, I'm not sure if I'd like to get back to the residents a little bit.
The
more.
only thing,
All
keep
I'm
in
saying,
mind,
Dennis.
if the trend, as Cheryl is portraying, does occur next year, what do you do for an encore next year?
Yeah, I think that's the point, Don. is
Yeah,
that
no,
we stay at 0.89 now because it's inevitable that we got to go to 0.87 or 8.
And listen, I walked out of my home thinking 8.89, but I put a lot of thought into the 0.87, 0.86 today. And I just wanted to bring it up to a point of discussion. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No. I'm actually, I was kind of like you walking out saying we're gonna keep it the same. But my line of thinking, when you talk about the stormwater enterprise, the commercial industrial are paying a bigger share of that stormwater enterprise because of the impervious surfaces they have. And to shift it to more of a burden as far as shifting a lower shift, I'm almost thinking we would go to a 0.9 as opposed to a 0.89. But I think overall, I think the uncertainty that we have right now, because yes, residential may climb next year, but it might not. Might be a bubble.
I can speak after.
And so I'm thinking let's stay with the devil we know, stay consistent with it, run with it, and then make adjustments according to how the market shifts.
That's actually what I was thinking too, stay at the 0.89, and then it gives us another year to see where our commercial base goes, to see how high the residential goes, and then back off from there. It might be better to wait until next year to make that adjustment. I mean, Don, I hear what you're saying about, school, but everyone is having issues with their roads. All the other towns are facing the same thing, that stormwater that we're facing as well. The schools, a lot of times, are what you put into it is what you get out of it, and a lot of towns are struggling with that too. They're not specific to us, and I'd hate to overburden our businesses that give so much back to our community, and we've already put a burden on them, that I would just keep it for another year.
And then if I may just want to reiterate too, that regardless of what we do with the shift, we're not raising any more revenue.
Exactly.
The revenue is going to stay the same. It's just a matter of
That's
what the
right.
source is.
It's gonna
So
be, right,
it's not as though if we change it to this, we're going to have more money for the schools, we're going to have more sidewalks and roads. The number is going to stay the
Right.
same. We're raising the same tax revenue.
If I could just add, I'm glad we came around, because that's where I was coming in at 0.89. Part of it was rhetorical, me throwing it out there, so the residents would understand our argument for keeping it the same and not going down. But to me, the biggest point that I just learned was our bond rating. And if the auditors come in and they assume there's too much risk there because of those top 10, and what if you lose one? Because we could lose one, we could lose two. I understand that's business. They may decide to go somewhere else. I get it. So for that reason, I'm inclined to stay at 0.89. And really, that's the piece that is really important for folks to understand.
Yeah, it's a good conversation. Keep in mind too, if one of the large businesses, a $1 million taxpayer, leaves,
Right.
we don't lose that $1 million. It's spread out
It's
amongst
spread out.
all the, so there's an impact there as well.
Yeah, I get that, but the burden is shared.
Yep.
And that burden, that could be a residential burden,
Absolutely.
and that's what they need to understand. If
Right.
you lose one of these big businesses,
It's painful.
it's painful because they're gonna have to pay.
But this is why the
Yeah.
DOR makes us have a public hearing on this, so that we can have this
Yeah.
conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good conversation.
Yeah.
So well attended.
We have hundreds of
Ours
viewers
is-
at home.
Not even
All that work.
A lot of people watch it on YouTube.
Mary, are there other pieces of your presentation that you want to?
So real quickly, we're, so that's it for the factor. We've got a couple of other things that we will need to have you take a motion on. So real quickly, our small business exemption, we are going to ask you to take action on adopting the 10% small business exemption. Cheryl has done some work, and we are estimating that this will benefit 83 businesses in the town of Bellingham. And it will effectively cost the town approximately $65,000 for them to have that small business exemption. We are a community that does not have a the residential exemption. So there are some communities, there's like 13 communities in the state of Massachusetts that offer a residential exemption. There are communities like Brookline and Arlington and Watertown where there's a lot of homes that are owned by property owners, and you have an incentive if you live in one of your properties and you rent out all the others, the one that you live in, you can get an additional tax break called a residential exemption. We don't have that kind of a tax base here in Bellingham, so a residential exemption does not apply here.
That kind of revenue.
We do not. We do
But I
not.
digress.
And the last thing is, I'm also going to ask you to adopt the amount for the exempt debt. So Town of Bellingham takes advantage of the water debt exclusion on our levy limit. And for FY22, I'm going to ask you to adopt an $840,000 exclusion. Last year's exclusion was $740,000. It's increased by $100,000 this year, and that is to cover the annual cost of the debt service for the South Main Street standpipe rehabilitation. I anticipate that I'm going to be borrowing for 10 years at about $100,000 a year to pay the cost of the standpipe rehab that was approved at town meeting the other night. So those are the 5 items that I need to ask this board to take action on.
Michael?
Mary, on the small business exemption, is the $1 million capped by the state? Because given property value, it seems like that's an awful low number.
It is a cap, and that is the conversation that we've been talking about before. And we have asked,
Our state rep.
we have asked Rep. Soder to sponsor a bill in order to raise that limit.
How'd that go?
And that is still
Yeah,
pending.
they did have hearings on it last year, so I know that there were hearings, but obviously nothing
I think it's
changed.
something we need to follow up on with reps. I'm sure he's
Should
out
I have to our
there
next
pushing. But we should, we should, that's a good idea.
Get a status on that.
On that
Lori,
one
can you make a
piece.
note of that and bring in Rep. Soder for?
For that one piece.
Yeah.
Next meeting or like beginning of the year?
Beginning of the year sounds
Yeah.
good, yeah. After Dan's all settled in and watching us on Zoom and mocking us.
That
Doubt
being,
it.
that being said, can we read all the motions at once?
You
You
can.
can definitely,
Go
it
for it.
would be
All
our
right.
honor to have you
Madam
read them.
Chair,
Can I
I
do
move
it
to
like
accept,
I'm sorry, but
I move to let Mary speak some more.
do you mind if we, I have to have individual votes recorded on.
Individual,
each
all right,
separately,
see.
so-
All right, Madam Chair, I move to accept a residential factor of 0.89 for fiscal year 2022 tax classification purposes.
Second? First by Dan, second by Kelly. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Madam Chair, I move to accept a fiscal year small business exemption of 10%.
Second. Can I second? or
You
no?
did. You
Okay.
tried.
Sure you did.
Dan,
It's all you.
second by Cindy.
Sure,
It's all-
All those
it's all
in
good on
favor,
the
say
record.
aye.
All of us
Aye.
get the second one of Dan's motion.
Okay, right, all right.
Come on,
So that's 5-0. Did we all say aye?
we did, yeah.
Say aye, Michael.
That's good.
All right.
I move to not accept a residential exemption for fiscal year 2022.
Second.
First by Dan, second by Don. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Okay, Michael, this is for you. I move to accept an exclusion for fiscal year 2022 of $840,000 for water debt repayment.
First by Dan, second by Michael. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Opposed?
Don, you make this one.
No, this is yours. isn't it?
No, I'm abstaining.
Okay, I move to continue the public hearing until 7 PM on Monday, December 6th, 2021.
Second?
Second by Mrs. Grant. All those in favor, say
You won't be
aye.
there?
Aye.
Aye. You won't be
Four in
here.
favor, one abstention because
You
he's
cracked me up.
getting out of Dodge. All right, anything else, Mary?
We are all set, and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you all, you
Mary.
guys, for
Thank
all
you.
of your work.
It's a lot of hard
Very, very
work.
helpful.
Great
Thank
job.
you.
Board of Assessors, all your hard work. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we're gonna move on with our agenda. Do I need to do anything as far as the public hearing, or we're good? Hillary, we closed it, right?
No, we're continuing.
We're
We
continuing.
continue, sorry.
Continuing.
Yes, yep, I'm good.
Something
All
like
right.
that.
We have grant acceptance.
All right, gifts and grants acceptance. Is that, Mary, is that you? Or,
Madam
You should know.
Madam Chair, I move to accept the gifts and grants in the amount of $18,128.80 for various and ongoing donations to the Council of Aging's Meals Program for the purpose to provide healthy meals to our Council of Aging members. Fund 6182, Spending Authority, Council of Aging Director.
first by Dan, second by Don. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? None.
Madam Chair, I move to accept the gift grant acceptance in the amount of $300,000 from WS Development. The developer is gifting to the town proceeds to cover the cost of Hartford Ave road improvement studies. The proceeds will be delivered to the town based on actual costs incurred. The town will deposit the proceeds and pay for the vendor invoices. Spending Authority, DPW Director.
Second. Second by Kelly. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Michael, I'm gonna turn it over to you for an update on the Meehan properties.
More of a statement than I guess an update, but I've had some recent discussions with members of the Meehan group. And I think that it's about time that we advance the process with the neighbors under my opinion, the following guidelines. The status quo does not work for most people in the community, in that area is a gateway to the town and is an eyesore. In speaking with various individuals, their options are basically three. Status quo remains an eyesore and doesn't help the community at all. The Meehan group can go back or go before the zoning board, which would require a 4/5 vote to modify the area from suburban to some sort of commercial business. And in doing so, the zoning board, in my opinion, gives the neighbors the maximum control over modifications or mitigation. Alternatively, should that fail or even skip that process, go to town meeting, which in my opinion, it's looked that way long enough that a rallying cry from members who aren't specific neighbors would say enough is enough and change it, which would no longer give the neighbors the mitigation opportunity that they want. And I think that ultimately it's in the neighbor's best interest to resolve the process through zoning. The Meehan group has already given indication that they want to give us the land that we need. We'll build appropriately for it. We've been given some plans for what could be, I would describe it as the 5 parcels because it's the 3 vacant houses and the 2 are across from mobile. And in speaking with Dennis and others, I think the next step would be to invite anyone that's in a butter to a meeting that I would offer to lead, or yourself as chair, that would simply say to the neighbors, those 3 things that the Meehan group will go forward with one of those 2 options. From the town's perspective, we like that we get the land. And to the extent that 2 or 3 neighbors are impacted, I get, but having attended the meeting at the high school, when people say they don't want lights in their backyards, they're already getting lights from Speedway, Sunoco, and everything up there. And it's no longer an appropriate area for a residential property. So why don't we see that the neighbors get the best outcome? Because separate from being on the board, select board, if this were to go to town meeting, I would stand up and support it because it's a blight on Bellingham. And
It's important to note too, after attending a lot of the meetings that Kevin Meehan had for the neighbors, the direct abutters were in favor of this plan. It is not the direct abutters that are not in favor. So the people whose property this would actually go up to their property lines are in favor of this. And they were the ones who were really shut out by the rest of it.
I mean, had it been 3 years ago, we went to town meeting and people had to stand up with their neighbors and said, I oppose it or I'm in favor of it. With the buttons in your hand, there isn't going to be I have to look into the eye of my neighbor. I could be sitting right next to my neighbor and say, yep, do it. My neighbor could say no and you would never know. So I think the climate with the way we vote at town meeting is sure to make something happen. And again, the meeting group has the option of bypassing the zoning board altogether. But in some conversations, I think that if we had that meeting in the first week or two of December and the appetite by the neighbors would then direct the meeting group to either go to zoning and accelerate the process, or even say, I'll go right to May town meeting.
So Michael really just wanted to make sure that you guys are on board, because we kind of in various ways, shapes and forms have been talking with Kevin, but just wanted you to,
This formalizes it, and
right,
and again, the meeting group has offered to meet with the neighbors again, but I think him meeting with the neighbors does not lay it out the way I just did, that they can benefit by the zoning process. Because there's enough people in town that have like, when is this gonna happen?
I'm happy to be part of that conversation as
Yeah.
well, where I've attended a lot of those meetings. And I think Michael's right that this is the,
Going on long enough.
yeah,
make sense to you guys as far as the three options and sitting down with them and
Two options.
two options?
Fish or cut bait.
yeah.
There's really two,
Because
yeah.
I mean, it's an unbuildable property at this point
Residential, yeah.
as residential.
Well, actually, it's not that, guys, it's not an unbuildable residential. You could, because I'm not saying I'm not in favor of whatever, but you could actually put, believe it or not, you could put 3-4 townhomes in the front with access behind the homes, with garages underneath, and they could be driving in and they could drive to the back. So that's not unbuildable.
That would require zoning change as well.
Regardless, but my point is, it's not an unbuildable, it required changes. And if the resident said, I'd rather have townhomes in front than another business. So I'm just saying, if you go down 109 in Medway, across from the Midway liquor store in the left hand side, I'm not saying I like it, but I drive there all the time and I see it and I'm going, that would be perfect. If we can't get something like this, we could at least have 3 or 4 townhomes. They're raised, garages are underneath and they're up top and they actually look pretty nice and they're on 109. So it's not impossible to put residential. If that's the alternative, I know he's not a residential builder. He would have to sell the land to someone.
And it's a relative value of that property too.
Right, exactly.
I mean, if we, as the town, were to move ahead, the assessed value of that land as a donation is fairly significant.
Yeah.
It's in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, I can tell you the 3 parking spaces we took from Rockland Trust was almost support from.
Because on the flip side, if he says I'm building houses, prudent man says, I'm not gonna donate the land. You could buy it from us for eminent domain and it's gonna cost the town $300,000.
I like that project because I think it would help the flow of traffic for gas and all those other items that we know there's a tremendous amount of traffic going through. We need something on that side. So I think the project itself, I'm in favor of the project. Just saying there are alternatives.
There are alternatives, but I think the alternative you're proposing of residential costs the town significant money. Eventually, because I wouldn't turn over the land if I was him.
I wouldn't do that.
If
So the
it
next
was
steps
anything
are,
else.
we'll try to set up a meeting with.
Yeah, and what's the process to send something to those neighbors to invite them to us?
Probably gonna give them a couple weeks,
We
right?
can try and get some sort of an abutters list there and put something together once you decide on a date. You want to do it after the first of the year or where?
I'd rather do it in December to move the process forward.
But we're already, what's today? Today's the 22nd.
Is it gonna be a board of select, is it gonna be a select board meeting or is it just gonna be, no, informal?
Or is it zone?
No, it would just be an informational meeting with the neighbors as to,
Without Mr. Mann.
Yeah.
Correct.
How many,
Yeah.
so how
We
many
already
people do you
have
think are
charter
gonna be
bylaw
there?
on the 7th, and we have a meeting on the 6th.
Discussion.
What's that?
I think you have more candid discussion.
Right.
than-
I'm just curious how many people like were.
We
would
couldn't
ex-
fit here. I
No.
think if we
Like,
open it up to all the abutter, and we could have over 30 people show up. They did the last one in the gym at the high school, just so people had room, because it was more people than the meeting that we had in the library.
In the gym or the auditorium?
The gym, we
The
have it in
the gym won't be available beginning the 29th
No,
until
but-
after 9 o'clock,
but
but
the auditorium won't.
the auditorium,
They also have the senior center, which.
senior center is a good idea.
Yeah.
Community room, the police.
Community room,
about
police
this
station, parking may be an issue.
Yeah.
Well,
Alright,
would we
so-
consider the 9th, Thursday the 9th? I don't know what the schedule is for,
Is that enough time?
Yeah, it's-
Is that enough time? 2 weeks?
to get the word out?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think from a preparation standpoint, there's a lot, it's more,
You've got the bullet points, right?
But we could get something out fairly quickly. I mean, you probably want to put it out the next Monday as opposed to.
yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking from the meeting group standpoint, if we were to wait till January, by the time anything gets rolling with zoning, I don't think they're going down two different train tracks. They got to start the town meeting process and the zoning process.
I'm curious, in thinking about the presentation, if there's been reactions about lights. I remember there being a lot of controversy when Cumberland Farms went in on Pulaski, the residents behind there were real concerned about lighting, what it's going to do, and the CVS. I want anecdotally, what's been any feedback from those residents? Have lights really been an issue? Because I know that like Cumberland did downlight, they did a really nice job down there. Have we heard anything from those residents after the fact that really it's not that bad? Because that would be great information to share with those residents on Cedar Hill and Ross Road.
My opinion, living near CVS, it's one of the darkest locations in town.
Unfortunately,
For business.
CVS is a bad example because they took their shields off.
Yeah.
They put a different style light in it. It's like Fenway Park down
Yeah,
there, but
goosebumps.
they've been told to get the
Yeah.
shields back on that directed straight down. Cumberland's great. The
The one
new
across the
gas
street,
station
the new
across
one.
the street.
Yeah.
Because the zoning says that you can't have spill beyond your property. So your light has to be contained within your property. You can't shine up on somebody else's home.
So what would be helpful?
I mean,
But
zoning
that
would actually help the
presentation-
processes because they're going to have
Well,
actual examples.
So that's my point. So those types of points would be helpful at the residents meeting. To kind of go over some of the zoning bylaws to protect that are enforced to protect the residents, on Cedar Hill and on Ross and Rose. Listen, this is all here to protect you already. It won't be spilled, but you could have some of those bullet points in your presentation.
So we'll move forward with trying to.
You want to shoot for December 9th?
And selfishly, the only reason I asked to do that is my work season starts nightly, beginning on the 13th, and every night of the week I'm generally out.
I'm around on the 9th, so
Okay.
that's fine.
All right, so
I
we'll,
think that
Dan, will you be there?
yeah, Dan, you can.
Sarah will be there.
All right, moving along on our agenda, anything under old business?
Senior tax work-off information?
Mary and I now Mary can refocus on this. We want to get some information for you, but again, it doesn't hold up anything as far as this year goes. We'll have something at
What's the
the,
WS development?
meeting.
Conference?
that was
That was the money we just
the grant
accepted.
we accepted.
All right, anything under new business? Hillary, would you? Actually, let's do the town administrator's report and then we'll come back to new business.
Representative Soda is hosting Congressman Auchincloss on Monday. 1 to 3, going to be visiting some different properties in town. So he'll definitely be coming here. I'll get some information out to the board, but 1 to 3 probably be coming here around 2 o'clock. So
What day is this?
if any of
Monday
you
is
are available Monday, and this is real short notice.
Okay.
Did you email that?
Yep, we'll put that out as soon as we have the firm itinerary.
It'll be right here.
Yes, he's
Okay.
gonna be visiting, I think he's gonna be visiting a couple of properties in town and then coming here. One of the things that Mike really wants to push on is the fact that we are pursuing those Economic Development Administration grant funds that are part of the $1 trillion infrastructure program for Hartford Avenue. So that's a huge project. We've had meetings over the, well, you know, you attended some of them, both of you haven't. The Congressman is somebody that's been zooming in. His office has been zooming in for the different meetings we've had up to this point. So wanted him to come down and have a first-hand look at it. And so Monday, it seems to be pretty firm that he's going to be here. So we'll get some information out on that. Town center improvements are chugging right along. Mrs. McNulty and I did a broadcast right in front of the town hall, and hopefully we'll be on cable access soon, dispelling some of the myths and rumors associated with that project.
So no rotary?
No rotary?
No, Rotary. That was our opening. That was our opening statement. But it's impressive. We had was the architect, right, that was with us?
Yeah, it was
Be a nice wall in front of the old town hall. It's gonna be,
What's happening with those two homes?
We did come to agreements with both homeowners as far as the front of their property goes. The one right next door to us, they're beginning a new deck. They were paid substantial domain takings from both properties, so they were paid an appraised amount, full and fair value of the takings, and we'll be creating a couple of parking spaces for them on their property. They'll have a sidewalk and be kind of like living where I grew up in the city. You walk out your front door and you got a sidewalk in the street. So yeah, but yeah, that's all I have.
that's it. All right. Our last order of business, Mr. Spencer. We'd be remiss if we didn't have a proclamation prepared for you. So allow me to read it, please, if you will. In recognition of your unwavering commitment to the town, we, the members of the Select Board, on behalf of the citizens of Bellingham, extend our deepest gratitude and appreciation to a soon-to-be former colleague. For the past decade, Dan Spencer has loyally and faithfully served our community as a member of the Select Board. As a senior member of our board, you always provided steadfast leadership through your good times and bad with your own unique, thoughtful, and selfless style. We are all very much aware of the dedication necessary to succeed as you have, and know you will have continued success as you embark on your new adventures. It is with great pleasure that we declare Monday, November 22nd, 2021, as Daniel J. Spencer Day.
You only get to
You got your birthday, and then you got National Daniel J. Spencer. Can we take a picture?
Sure.
Thank you. It's like get in there.
Picture with the final picture.
Yeah.
I know, right? Coming in, Kel?
We're gonna adjust chairs.
Actually, we should have Hillary in the picture too. Could you
No,
mind
it's,
taking a
no,
picture?
it's fine.
Yes.
No. Ready? 1, 2,
Cheers.
3. One more.
Bud Light.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you so
You've been
much.
great. It's been awesome.
Sounds like you have one question as this chairwoman.
Yes.
It said
Yeah.
a senior member, not the senior.
Yes, Mr. Connor.
When I had to step off the board, I don't think anything formal was done, but I thought with Dan Levy, do we have to formally acknowledge that we will not be seeking a special election and we'll go as a 4-member board?
You could. You don't have to, but I think it'd be a good thing to do. So people
To
ask,
acknowledge it,
are they
because
gonna have a
it-
special election, which obviously wouldn't make any sense because it'd be.
Because the one point of
Yeah.
clarification, I thought that if there is 4 members left on the board and for whatever reason, 3 are in attendance, is it required that the vote be 3-0 or 2-1?
We got a clarification on that, surprised me, but what Joe Fair had said when he was at the finance committee meeting was it'd be a 2-1 vote would do it. It's a majority of those present. I always thought it was a
Yeah.
majority of those that actually serve.
Yeah.
You know, but,
Oh, well, and since Dan, I don't think can make that motion, I would just like to formally motion that the current select board remain as a 4-member board until Mr. Spencer's position be replaced at
Effective November 30th.
effective November 30th. There you go.
Second. All right. First by Mr. Connor, second by Mrs. Brandt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And our town clerk says, thank you very much.
Yeah.
We don't need a special.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Wow.